The morning light spilled across the airport windows as passengers hurried through Gate 12. The flight to Seattle was boarding on time, a rare blessing for the early travelers. Among the crowd was a young woman named Elena Marsh, clutching a small leather journal against her chest. She spoke to no one, her headphones shielding her from the chaos of the terminal. When she reached her seat, 21A by the window, she smiled faintly. It wasn't the kind of smile born from joy, but one that tried to hide sorrow. Outside, the sky was pale blue, brushed with clouds like soft cotton. The hum of the plane's engines comforted her. She always liked the sound. It reminded her of her father. The flight attendants moved down the aisle offering warm greetings. One of them, a kind woman named Claire, noticed Elena's nervous hands. "First time flying?" she asked softly. Elena shook her head. "No, just the first time alone." As the plane took off, Elena opened her journal. The first page held a letter written in trembling handwriting, to the captain. Her fingers traced the inked words, but she couldn't bring herself to read it again. It was the last message her father had written before he died, a pilot who had once worn the same uniform as the man now flying this aircraft. Above the clouds, time felt different. The seatbelt light dimmed and passengers began to relax. Elena gazed out the window, her reflection merging with the clouds. She remembered being a child, sitting in the cockpit beside her father, watching the horizon glow with dawn. He had promised her that skies never truly ended. They only changed color. Hours into the flight, the calm was broken by a small tremor. Turbulence, mild at first. The passengers barely noticed, but Elena's heart tightened. She looked around. The others continued chatting, scrolling through phones, ordering coffee. But something about the air felt off, heavy, tense, like silence before thunder. Claire appeared again, reassuring everyone that it was normal. Elena nodded but clutched her journal tighter. She had a strange urge to hand it to someone, to make sure it wasn't lost. But before she could act, the captain's calm voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a bit of turbulence, nothing to worry about. Please keep your seatbelts fastened." The cabin fell quiet again. Elena tried to relax, closing her eyes. She didn't know then that this flight, this ordinary journey, was about to uncover a message that had been waiting in silence for years. Somewhere up front, the captain paused, looking at the name on his passenger list. His hands trembled slightly before he turned off the intercom. Seat 21A. He recognized that name. Captain Richard Hale had flown hundreds of routes in his 20-year career, but something about Flight 237 felt different from the moment he stepped into the cockpit. He couldn't explain it, just a quiet heaviness in his chest, like the air itself was carrying memories. As the plane leveled at 35,000 feet, he glanced at the crew manifest on his tablet. His eyes lingered on a name halfway down the list. Elena Marsh, seat 21A. He froze. That last name, Marsh. It struck something deep, something buried under years of silence. He swallowed hard and turned his gaze toward the endless clouds. Marsh. There was only one man he had known with that name. Captain Daniel Marsh. His mentor, his best friend, and the man whose plane went down 12 years ago during a storm over the Rockies. No one survived. No remains were ever found. The co-pilot's voice snapped him out of his trance. "Everything all right, Captain?" Hale nodded quickly. "Yeah, just a little memory," but he couldn't shake the thought. Could she be related to that Marsh? His old friend had a daughter, maybe 12 or 13 at the time of the accident. If she were alive today, she'd be, mid-20s? He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his graying hair. "Elena," he murmured under his breath. "You're here." Back in the cabin, Elena was unaware of the storm gathering in the cockpit. She had finally opened her journal, reading the letter again for what felt like the 100th time. "If you ever find Captain Hale, tell him I forgive him. It wasn't his fault. The skies choose their own endings. Dad." She bit her lip, tears filling her eyes. She had never met Richard Hale, but she had grown up hearing his name whispered in grief and guilt. The world had blamed him for her father's death, and he had vanished from the public eye soon after. But Elena had discovered the truth in her father's recovered flight log years later. Hale wasn't the cause, he was the one who had tried to save him. And now fate had seated her on his plane. The seatbelt light flickered again. This time the turbulence hit harder. The plane jolted, coffee spilled, and anxious murmurs rippled through the cabin. Elena's journal fell to the floor, pages fluttering like wings. "Everything's all right, folks," Claire announced, her voice calm but eyes uncertain. "Just a rough patch." Up front, Hale's hands gripped the controls tightly. "That's not just turbulence," he muttered. "We've got a pressure drop in the left engine." The co-pilot began procedures, but Hale's mind was far away. In another storm, another flight, another desperate descent. History was repeating itself. Then the intercom light blinked. Hale hesitated for a long moment before pressing the button. His voice filled the cabin, steady yet heavy with something deeper. "This is your captain speaking. Folks, I want you to know you're in safe hands. But if there's anyone in seat 21A, please don't be afraid. You're exactly where you need to be." Elena froze. Her heart pounded. How did he know? She looked toward the front of the plane, and for the first time she felt the strange pull of destiny taking shape in the clouds. The cabin had fallen into uneasy silence. Passengers murmured prayers, others gripped their armrests. The turbulence still rattled the aircraft, but Elena's trembling had nothing to do with the shaking plane. The captain's words echoed in her mind. "If there's anyone in seat 21A, please don't be afraid. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be." Her pulse quickened as memories of her father's voice filled her mind. The bedtime stories he told about flying, the way he called the clouds whispers of the sky, and the day he left for that one final flight, the one that never returned. Now, all these years later, she found herself on a flight commanded by the man who had been with him until the end. Claire, the flight attendant, knelt beside her seat, her face gentle but worried. "Are you all right, miss?" Elena nodded slowly, her voice trembling. Could you tell the captain I need to speak with him?" "Please, it's important." Claire hesitated. "During the flight it's not possible, but please," Elena whispered, clutching the journal to her chest. "Just tell him. Seat 21A, he'll understand." There was something in her tone, desperate pleading, that made Claire nod without another word. She disappeared toward the front of the cabin, her steps quick against the carpeted aisle. In the cockpit, Captain Hale kept his eyes on the horizon. The plane was steadying, though patches of dark clouds loomed ahead. When Claire's voice came through his headset, he felt his throat tighten. "Captain," she said softly, "the girl in seat 21A, she wants to speak with you. She said you'd understand." The cockpit filled with silence. The co-pilot looked over, puzzled. "You know her?" Hale's voice was barely a whisper. I think I know who she is." For a moment he couldn't breathe. The memories he had buried for over a decade came crashing down. The radio silence that night, Daniel Marsh's last words, the guilt that had eaten him alive ever since. He had replayed that night 1,000 times in his mind, wishing he could have done more. Now, his best friend's daughter was sitting just a few rows behind him, holding a letter that could break the chains he'd carried all these years. He turned to the co-pilot. "Take over for 5 minutes." When the cockpit door opened, the hum of the cabin seemed louder. Passengers looked up, surprised to see the captain himself walking down the aisle. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes carried storms of their own. Elena saw him approach, her heart pounding. The resemblance to her father, the calm strength, the eyes that understood the sky, made her breath catch. "Captain Hale?" she asked softly. He nodded, voice low. "Elena Marsh?" She handed him the journal. "This was my father's. He wrote it before his last flight. Her voice broke. Before he disappeared." Hale took it with trembling hands. He opened the first page, and froze. There, written in familiar handwriting, were words that stopped time itself. "To my friend Richard, if you're reading this, it means the skies have found their balance again. Forgive yourself. You did all you could. Tell my daughter that the clouds remember her name." Tears filled Hale's eyes. For years he had been haunted by the thought that he'd failed his friend. But here, in a letter that had crossed the span of tragedy and time, forgiveness had finally reached him. Elena reached out and placed her hand over his. "He wanted you to know he never blamed you." For the first time in 12 years, Captain Hale smiled. a fragile, breaking smile. "Your father was the bravest man I ever knew," he whispered. "And you? You have his heart." The engines roared louder then, and the seatbelt sign blinked again. The sky outside darkened, the storm ahead was close. But inside the plane, for the first time, two souls who had carried the same grief were finally free from silence.